Hello, everyone. When Father Richard and we interviewed Mike Aquilina, one of the questions that I put to Mike was, how would St. Joseph have worked? And I really invite you to watch this clip again because he gives insights that reveal to us, a unique perspective on work that perhaps many of us don't think about. So watch the clip and I'll come back and just make a comment on it. Thank you.
Well, it's interesting. He must have done it well. That's one thing that I think we can surmise after reading the New Testament. We find that he was remembered as the worker, the tekton, as you said. That's a Greek word. It's a generic term for carpenter or craftsman, actually, very generic. Tradition tells us that he was a carpenter, and that's a very early tradition, actually, coming out of Palestine. That he was a maker of plows. He probably did a lot of construction work as well, because in the reign of King Herod, there was a great demand for construction work, and a lot of it was within walking distance of where Joseph and Mary and Jesus lived. So there was work to be done, and Joseph was willing to do it. He was known as the craftsman, the tekton. What's kind of beautiful is that the culture he lived in was a culture that admired men who worked with their hands, and even women who worked with their hands. They saw a value in ordinary labor, and that was unusual for its time. As a matter of fact, according to Herodotus, it was unique for its time. Herodotus said that every people on earth had contempt for laborers. And we have the witness of people, men like Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, all saying that manual laborers should not have citizenship, they should not have a vote, they should not be considered possessing a full human dignity. They did not have the same rights, they should not have the same rights as the aristocracy had. So the idea was that leisure was a virtue and labor was a vice. Now, Joseph, we can be sure, did not live in a culture like that, because there was a great value placed on these men, these men who worked with their hands, especially in the reign of King Herod. King Herod placed a high value on the work of carpenters and stonemasons, and really anyone who would go by the name of tekton, because he needed them for these construction projects, which were grand, which were massive. And Herod was so liberal in his construction of these things that he became known all through the Mediterranean world for this art. And so the craftsmen in Judea were actually in demand all through the Mediterranean for construction projects that Herod pledged to do in distant lands, as far away as Cyprus. So Joseph was living as a carpenter, as a craftsman, at a time when it was a really good thing to be a craftsman, and it was a badge of some respect too. I mean, you didn't make a lot of money, but you were able to put food on the table, and you could probably depend on the money coming in for quite some time. At the time, and again, Herod had a very long reign, more than 30 years. At the time of his death, a lot of his construction projects were still unfinished, and some of them were still, under work for another few decades after that, including the Jerusalem temple. So there was a lot of work to be done long into the future, into the generations of your family.
The things that Mike makes clear to us is that the Jewish people understood God as a tekton. This word is not used in our language, of course, but it's a Greek word. But it means basically an artisan or a craftsman. That's how God reveals himself. I mean, he's not, like a real carpenter, but it's a word that we understand that helps us understand something about God because he has made the universe. And this translates into the way you and I understand our own work and how we work, or how at least we can work, how God calls us to work. And this is so important for us because work is something that it's done at least 8 hours a day, if not 10 in some cases. Shifts are 12 hours a day, 4 times a week. But then what about all the other stuff that we do? Housework, even our leisure is a kind of work, although it's a different kind of work. So it's really important that we are able to understand how St. Joseph did his work, how we understood work. Basically, in the Old Testament, Mike reminds us that the great heroes are not people that we would call of intellectual prowess, but they're workmen. There are people like Noah, who was a sailor, Abel, Abraham, Jacob, and David. David, remember, was a sheep herder. He looked after the sheep. So, but all these people, what they did was, with how they treated their work, was they did it for love of God. So when we do our work for love of God, then it becomes a beautiful thing. Even if it's difficult at times, or it can have elements of being boring or tedious. But when we do it for love, then it becomes a beautiful thing. So he gave the example of when his father was welding, he was loving his mother, his mother, his wife, and his children, Mike himself. You make love the end of the act of working. In other words, when you start your work, Lord, I want to do this for love of you, and I want to do this for love of my family. Just that act alone changes the meaning of your work. Whether it's really exciting work, or perhaps it's not so exciting. But it becomes, right at that moment, super important. Because all work, if it's ethical or moral, no matter how seemingly insignificant it is, now begins to participate in the creative work of God himself. And it takes on a value that is beyond our comprehension. Even more so when it is united to the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. It actually acquires what we would call a saving value, or a salvific value. It's a technical term, but its basic meaning is that it contributes to my going to heaven when it's offered to God. Because when we offer it to God, it's like when you buy your spouse or a friend a gift or a present, you don't buy them junk. You want to buy them something that's good, something that they're going to like or love, and perhaps even a really nice gift. Well, when we offer our work to God, we want it done well. We want it done, with as best as we can do it, and that's what it means to offer that to God. So, and we are imitating Jesus, who labored at the craft of his Father and labored as a teacher after that. So from Genesis, where God is this craftsman who makes the universe and this world and you and me, to Jesus, who worked as a carpenter shop, we too, you and I, can imitate God, offering our work to him. So strive to do it well and do it for love, and it'll change your work forever. It becomes an adventure.